Welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast.
A collection of interviews, candid commentary, and general nonsense for the clinical research community.
Check us out at notetofilepodcast.com.
And now, without further ado, on to the show.
Hello and welcome. All right, welcome guys to another Note to File, specifically a Sticky Notes episode. The date is April 15th, 2025.
Happy Tax Day.
Oh yeah, it is tax day, isn't it? Do we still have to pay those? Are there IRS
give it a whirl,
agents?
see what happens.
Do people work at the IRS still?
Well,
I'm going to let it ride. I'm going to let it ride and see what happens. You know, I think it's more efficient if I don't file my taxes. So I'm doing a service. I'm doing a patriotic service to the United States of America by not paying my taxes.
Look at you.
I know. It'll go over well. All right, guys, like I say, welcome to a Sticky Notes. I want to hear your comments, questions. These are meant to be, again, sort of short episodes where we sort of cover more topical things. Always want to hear from you guys what you want to hear about. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. It's, I don't know, Tuesday, hanging in there.
I know it is Tuesday. It's good. We're a day early. We'll be heading up at the University of Wisconsin's clinical trial. I don't know what it's called officially, so I'm going to botch it, but it's their clinical research conference.
Yep, Thursday. I think it's like Research Professionals Conference. Again, yeah, also botching it. It's on Thursday, UW, Wisconsin.
Okay, we just gave them a great promo. But it's cool. You know, I've gone since the first year they did it. Kind of a fan of what they're doing. It seems a little more sort of progressive for a university, especially in their trying to get more involved in community research and stuff like that. So big fan of what they're doing up there.
I mean, I'm totally biased given I'm a Badger, so of course it's excellent. They only would put out the best content.
We won't hold it against you. Well, let's jump right in. First of all, make sure I don't screw this up, which I probably will. So something I actually saw on my LinkedIn feed, I want to say either late last night or early this morning, is the sale of CenExel clinical research. And this is actually something I've kind of followed for a little while. And I pulled up this article just because, it kind of looks like this is something they've been at for a while. It mentions, sort of testing the waters. This article is from 2024, early 2024, but looks like they've been attempting to sell since mid 2021.
When's the last time there was a large sort of site network sale? Because I haven't heard anything for a couple of years, or like a large sale.
I don't know. And I mean, it's also perfectly possible that I wouldn't know. I just happened to see this. So, and I know technically, I think this isn't official or officially done yet.
I think they're aiming for what, like sometime second quarter.
Yeah. So I'll move on to this that came out yesterday at 8 a.m. Bay Pine, who I've never heard of, which also doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Okay, I want to dig into Bay Pine though and who they are in a little bit, because I think that's an interesting, like their portfolio I think is fascinating.
Well, I'll tell you what they are. They're a private investment firm that drives digital transformation in market-leading businesses.
Well, there you go. Crystal clear.
What else do you need to know? Nothing.
It's totally comprehensive.
They announced they entered into a definitive agreement to acquire CenExel. CenExel, of course, is a clinical trial site network. Kind of normal stuff here. I think some interesting points maybe is, 10,000 trials and 100,000 patients, which, if my math's not wrong, that's about 10 patients per study. It's kind of interesting if you average that out. But what else jumped out to me that I thought was kind of an interesting statement from Bay Pine. CenExel is an ideal fit for our digital transformation strategy, with significant opportunities to bolster its data infrastructure and leverage AI-enabled tools to improve patient recruitment and site performance. What does that mean?
It reads like walking in an exhibit hall and reading someone's booth.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
That's what it reads like, but I got no idea. Couldn't tell you.
Does it mean they want to, now shove in all of this, new digital stuff, put AI in there? Is CenExel running off of paper? Maybe they are. I mean, I know that I've read about some big site networks who do run off of paper, but I wonder, to what degree is that going to help them evolve into a truly next generation digitally enabled research platform, which if you think back to a few weeks ago when we talked to Science 37, is there anything analogous here? Like, it sounds like they want to get crazy techie, and it sounds like that's something that maybe didn't work so well for Science 37.
Well, right, because science. I mean, when we talked to Tyler, the whole conversation was they were a site, got a little distracted with the tech, went back to their roots, and are now focused on being a site again. This seems like they're following that same trajectory, but without, unless they, there's some folks who can't, who don't learn something unless they experience it themselves. So maybe we got that going. But I think
There's a lot of those.
there's a lot of people like that. I think the thing that's fascinating in this to me, and it reads like, especially if they're coming in, the goal of Baypine, what is going to be turned a profit, right? And so are they trying to gain efficiencies by shifting things into more tech focused, assuming that they can, I don't know, make reductions in workforce staff or other changes to reduce its cost in other ways and try to make it more efficient, which again, I mean, I'm all for tech. I think obviously biased on that. I think there's a lot of benefit to be had, but I think it's a tool. It's not a solution. It's not the solution. It's a tool to be used. And I wonder what the thought process is here and what the plan is to make this profitable. Because do we have any idea on the scale and size of what the dollars are attached to this?
So let's go backwards first. And I also want to point out here that blah, 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 subject to customary closing conditions, regulatory approvals. It's expected to be completed during the second quarter of 2025. So that's coming up.
Between now and, sometime before July 1st.
The third quarter. Yeah. Sometime between now
and the
third quarter. But if you look back on the article from 2024, again, I don't know how accurate all this information is, but CenExel appeared to have an EBITDA of 85 million in 2023. They were hoping to fetch, 13 to 14x, which would put them at about 1.2 billion. So if we jump ahead, thank you, Internet Archive, and the ability to bust through paywalls. Please, Bloomberg, don't sue me. It says here that Baypine agreed to acquire CenExel for 1.5 billion. And, take it with a grain of salt. This was according to people familiar with the matter who, didn't want to be.
It's not closed yet. That's
identified.
Not at liberty to actually say anything right now because I'm sure it's not finalized.
Sure. But that implies at least that it's a multiple in the mid to high teens of its earnings, before interest, tax, depreciation.
And this is my ignorance, but in this space, is that a common multiple for like site networks to go to?
And again, my knowledge is not the best, but it seems high. But I also don't know if we're dealing. This is beyond a scale that I've seen before,
right?
So maybe they do demand that kind of multiple with the kind of scale that they have, but it certainly seems higher than what I had been hearing about over the last couple of years, but who knows.
So I'll also say I also don't fully understand exactly how the valuations for site networks are done because so much is up in the air. I'm not fully exactly where the valuation comes from based on trial volumes and all the things. I just not really sure how that happens. It's not like
yeah, I'd be curious. And I talked a little bit with some PE guys from when I was at SOS, I think, and a couple of people who've made obviously smaller, cells, right. But I think there seems to be some, and again, if you're out there interested in coming on and talking about this, I'd love to hear, straight from the horse's mouth. But, my understanding is that there can be some funny business in so much as, what a pipeline looks like for a site. And I even heard this come out of the private equity guy's mouth. They want to see a pipeline. Now, I think we all know if you run a site, a pipeline hardly means shit. That's like theoretical money, right? You can have a pipeline of contracts that say you're going to make $50,000 a patient and you're contracted for 100 patients. Well, you could enroll 2. So I don't know how they suss that out. I mean, I've made this mistake before, but I hope these guys are smarter than I am and have a way of, sort of determining the risk and what that involves. But
Well, I think
either way,
that's going to be the case in like anything where any pipeline is subjective to some level. But I think when you get into certain types of contracts and agreements with like ARR contracts or reoccurring revenue or licensures and stuff, like it's a little bit more predictable. But yeah, to your
reliable.
point,
Yeah.
like you can predict I'm going to have 10 patients. I mean, but that's
Well, yeah. And that was the conversation at SOS is someone
insane.
saying, we want to see predictable. And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but very little seems predictable in the space. But, again, that's just my own small opinion. And I think something you were pointing at earlier that's kind of interesting about Bay Pine's portfolio companies is that they include an auto repair chain, a dermatology business, and outdoor furniture manufacturing. So that's...
Here's what they're going to do. They're going to be able to get patients to the clinics because they're going to have, automotive services. They're going to be able to furnish the clinics because they're going to have furniture. So they're really coming at it to be self-sustaining.
This is like vertical integration, right? It's like putting it all together. Like, we're going to outfit you with the finest outdoor furniture in your clinics. We're going to drive you there on the finest tires available. And maybe you can get a Botox while you're there, from their dermatology partner.
Full service. It's actually a new form of, patient payment. It's just offering services.
Crazier things have happened, I'm sure. Not the worst idea in the world. Anyways, I found that extremely interesting. I'm still curious to see if it's just sort of a random occurrence, if we're going to see more of this, here, especially, and even the article kind of points to like amongst all the uncertainty, are we going to see these kinds of things happening, just an uptick? But there you go. They did it. Great job, CenExel.
Well,
I hope you guys made enough money.
We'll look back in July. Who knows? Not finalized yet.
Yeah, true enough. But I hope you guys make enough money that you can post pictures from your yacht in Southeast Asia, and you don't have to enroll any more patients in trials if you don't want to.
Get those private planes.
It's true. Very good. Okay. Well, what else?
What else we got?
We got, and this is something else I'd be really curious to know if anyone in the audience has some knowledge about. This was released April 10th, so about 5 days ago, that the FDA wants to essentially replace FDA animal testing requirements with potentially AI-based computational models. And it sounds like they really want to kind of eventually phase out, animal testing as much as they can. And, use things like advanced computer simulations, human-based lab models. I don't know. This is interesting and probably admittedly something that without a lot of research, I'm a little torn on.
Yeah. And I want to fully, I don't know. I mean, I know a decent amount about AI, but as far as in the drug development space, not something I'm, overly as familiar with. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how exactly this happens. And I think there's some cases in this where I was thinking like they're going to replace animal testing and drugs that have already done human testing overseas. So like there's some things that kind of make sense, but there's also just questions I would have too. I mean, I think it's also like conceptually I get it, but I also think, a concept can be good. Then in practice, how does that work? I mean, like there's in theory, all these things make sense, but it's only as good as the model itself. And what are the models and how are they evaluating them and all of that. I'd love to learn more. I mixed feelings on this too.
For sure. I mean, look, I don't think it's hard to be sort of against unnecessary animal testing. Like,
gotta make PETA happy.
Right. I mean, very few people would be like, no, we need to kill more animals with our drugs or whatever the case may be. Again, maybe a little hyperbole there, but I wonder, and I'm not smart enough to know, it says, software models could simulate how a monoclonal antibody distributes to the human body and reliably predict side effects based on the distribution as well as the drug's molecular composition. Is that true? Is that something they can do now? It seems to sort of, could. Okay. Well, can it or could it? And can it do it reliably enough to, forego
So
animal testing.
this reminds me of that thing that came out a couple of years ago, and they were like, where AI is going to take over radiologists' jobs, and we're going to be able to do it. And then now you're looking at like the results of like it's looking at like breast cancer, and it's calling it like a liver. Like it's just like there's some wild shit that comes out of that. So I wonder if this is like, again, but it comes down to, in theory, could it do it? Yes. Can it do it, and can it do it well and predictably and reliably? I think that's obviously a lot of testing needs to happen there, but also like then is this just like another phase before? Because then you just jump into people research and you say, great, now
Yeah.
we're ready for phase one. Like phase
Well, I
one's
mean,
already tricky, right?
yeah, I feel like you're gonna have to. I mean, you're still gonna have to have phase 1 trials, right? But you just skip the animals.
Right.
I guess again, it'll bear out like everything else. If all of a sudden people are dropping dead, or we see a big uptick in AEs, SAEs, side effects, whatever the case may be, then I guess we'll find out. But
Well, I almost think about it from a recruitment perspective, though, right? Like phase ones are hard enough to recruit for because, like, hey, we haven't put this in people before. Come put it in your body. And that would, but it's like, hey, well, we've done all this testing. Now it's like, hey, we ran this through computers. Now come put it in your body. Like, I just like from a public perception, like that, it'd be interesting to see how that impacts it.
Well, and I want this kind of segues interestingly, I guess, into the next thing that we'll talk about here briefly, because we know that there's at least some level of mistrust in like clinical trials in general. There's a lot of data that we've read that or just go to a site and talk to patients all day, and you'll understand that there's a general misconception and misunderstanding for a large segment of the population about clinical trials. And then I wonder, we're on LinkedIn, I see the word AI a bajillion times a day, but to your normal, I say normal as if it's different than everyone else, anyways, to your sort of person who's not so plugged into working in tech or working in a field that touches AI a lot, is that another like, oh, do we trust AI? Like, do people trust AI? So if you say, no, don't worry, we ran it through AI, we ran this experimental drug through AI, you're good, so let me shoot it up into your arm now. Is that going to be like another layer of potentially distrust or uncertainty for research volunteers?
I mean, I'd have to imagine so.
Yeah, and again, presumably yes, but maybe not. There could be it could be off base here. But
we got a comment from LinkedIn user.
Oh, famous LinkedIn user, huh? Sorry, I can't hardly do that.
Would this even be considered preclinical? Would this be considered preclinical?
I mean, I guess it would, right?
I don't know, but if it's replacing clinical testing, I don't know. Do you have to find like a new phase?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not smart enough to have a good answer for that. But again, I think partly, again, if anyone's out there who has more knowledge than me, then I'd certainly be interested to hear from them. And then what's up, Justin? His explanation is that it looks like digital twins. Yeah, I mean, we can't hit diversity goals. We are not preventing duplicate participants. How are we going to create digital twins on data that isn't sound? Perfectly reasonable question. And I don't know.
And I think this is like a little caveat. I think just AI in general. So oftentimes people see like this is going to solve all our problems, but like AI is a tool, not the solution, and it needs to be trained on good data and needs to have feedback loops to determine if it's doing things correct. Otherwise, it's going to hallucinate. You're going to get shit data out of it, shit outputs. So I think in general, that's a concern, a misconception, I think, of how people think about AI. It's a tool, not a solution. But so yeah, it takes Justin spot on.
No, it's going to solve all of our problems. How dare you?
Sorry.
So yeah, we came across this article about a month ago. And this is not a topic that hasn't been sort of almost a trope at this point, the erosion of trust. And, this is a sort of more editorial here about, the erosion of trust and its devastation on drug trial recruitment. We're not hitting heavy on, a lot of the political swirlings that are going on that I know you're all aware of, but certainly, I think it'll be incredibly hard in this environment, to continue to have people have trust. And this article talks a little bit about some previous things, especially with the Trump administration ending funding to USAID, abruptly halting clinical trials, which debatably is sort of potentially in direct in direct opposition to the Hippocratic Oath in
That's an
terms of
ethical
do
concern.
no harm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ethics are optional. Is that right?
I think that's what we're going with these days.
I think so too. And it talks a little bit about Tuskegee syphilis experiments, and then obviously we just dealt with COVID, and I think you kind of, before we started recording, laid out a timeline by which, like, we've never had this overwhelming trust in clinical trials anyway, right?
Well, I mean, in 2018, like no one really. I mean, there was a small segment of the population who knew what clinical trials were, but like the general public did not know clinical trials. So there, you don't know it, you don't trust it. You slip into 2020. I think it became highly politicized as far as clinical trials tied up into vaccines, and so you launch into it. Now everyone's aware of it, but everyone has opinions. And then I think that's only progressed in the last 5 years, especially in the last 3 months, where science and research has become politicized. And so now everyone has opinions about it with very little knowledge of it. Which, if you're talking about recruitment to clinical trials, that's the general public are the ones who are being recruited into it. It's not the people in general who are super familiar with it. It should be everyone. And so now everyone has opinions based on very little information, and we're tying it now to politics, which only gets hairier.
That's a good idea.
Good.
Shout out, Damien. I heard you playing Frank Ocean in your car, so you're good in my books, man. What's up, Sfera, the clinical trials guru himself, saying the burden will be on phase 1 sites and beyond to document safety. Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much of an impact that'll have in terms of increasing the need and even just the volume of safety events for clinical sites. It'll be interesting.
The FDA will be more efficient, though.
Everyone will be more efficient. Just relax. We're moving towards efficiency. Okay. What else we got? We're already getting down to time here. Another thing we can all look forward to, article published, I believe today, or updated today, is the U.S. beginning now to probe into specifically pharmaceutical imports and potentially setting the stage for pharmaceutical tariffs. I know that, again, I'm not always the most up-to-date educated person when it comes to the news because I hate it. But, pharmaceuticals were sort of, not included in a lot of this, or exempt, from the 10% tariffs that were laid out on April 5th. But, Trump is saying that they'll face separate tariffs.
Yeah, and this is just interesting to me about what the implications will be on this, because I think if you sort of read through some of the things that people have been saying about this, where like larger companies potentially could weather the storm and like absorb some of the tariffs a little bit more, but it's going to have impact on generic folks who don't have those margins in their profits. But ultimately, like, who's going to end up absorbing the cost for this, right? Like, is it going to be the pharma companies absorbing the cost, or is it going to get passed through to the patients?
Oh, surely pharma, because out of the goodness of their hearts, will absorb the cost, right?
Sure. Yep. That's the one.
We know that they care about
deeply
people more than anything else. Mm-hmm. Patient centricity. No one would just say that.
We don't just slap that on a banner these days. That's the
that's
core.
Absolutely ridiculous. But it looks like they did or are taking public comment. The 21-day deadline, I believe you had found it at one point. Was it published at the beginning of the month?
So technically the probe started on April 1st, it's really now in the past day or two become publicized that this is happening, and then at the 21-day window. So math the 22nd, so like next week.
Okay, there you go. So we'll post a comment with the link to those the ability to make public comments. Interesting, and I'm sure they'll definitely take the public's opinion into account. But it says here, the drug industry's argued tariffs could increase the chance of shortages and reduce access for patients. Generic drug manufacturers, as you point out, specifically operate on pretty thin margins. Any cost increase might prompt some to leave the market, since it could be hard for them to absorb or pass along the impact. Tariffs will only amplify the problems that already exist in the U.S. market for affordable medicines, says that guy, John Murphy III, CEO of the Association for Accessible Medicines. So yeah, that's. I mean, does that roll down to clinical trials in any impact?
I mean, you have to imagine it is. I mean, you're still, even if it's an experimental drug, experimental agent, that's still being produced somewhere, right? So like, do these tariffs, then it's not commercially available, does that still get impacted by drugs in development?
I don't know. I mean,
I
I
mean,
certainly have to think that if margins are, affected negatively by big pharma, they have less money to dump into R&D. I mean, R&D doesn't make them money, right? Now, I guess it's a catch-22 because, if they want to have that next blockbuster, it's still got to go through trials.
Right.
So I wonder if we'll see less of a chance, less risk, maybe. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see how this. Interesting to see how a lot of this plays out.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly. And to a couple of comments here before we get wrapped up. We're already a minute over. That's unacceptable. I assume this is still Damien, probably talking about the some of the lack of trust and saying part of it's because we still refer to participants as subjects. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I do too occasionally. Also say patients. So I think some of that goes back to how you were trained, so to speak. I know in academia I was like, subjects is like what we were told, to refer to participants, and some of that
You're
is hard
dating
to
yourself.
beat out of you. Well, I'm an old wise man, so take that into consideration. Fair enough. So last thing I want to pop up, just because I know there's a ton of people going through layoffs right now. It sucks, but I find it interesting to sort of follow Fierce Biotech's layoff tracker. May not be of interest to you if you are laid off, but I think it's at least a nice little snapshot of kind of what's going on in the industry. I don't know necessarily the curricula or the criteria by which they find this stuff and post it. They do ask you reach out if of any layoffs going on, but I mean, if you look even at just the beginning of this month, we're seeing some big guys, Roche, Gilead, Pfizer. Looks like they closed or they sold a 5-building campus, and laid off 56 employees. So it seems like we're definitely, I mean, March looks like a little bit of a bloodbath here. I mean, these are some big companies again, BMS, Novartis, Merck. It's getting ugly out there, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think across the board, no one's really been spared right now.
No, it's true. And hopefully things continue to get better. I mean, it's hard to imagine that given the relative uncertainty that's sort of going on right now. But nonetheless, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stay hopeful. Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. They'll fix it.
All right. Anything else before we sign out here?
No, I got nothing.
Same. All right, guys. Well, we'll be back next week. Who is our guest next week?
We're going to have Bree Burks from Viva is going to come on.
All right. Bree from
next
Viva.
Wednesday.
Always fun. And we'll be back at our normal time, Wednesday at noon Central. You know what? I'm going to say Central. I'm going to pretend like Central is the most important time zone.
It clearly is.
very clearly is. All right. Thanks, guys. If you have comments, questions, etc., hit us up on any of the many places where you can hit us up. LinkedIn, notefilepodcast.com. I want to hear from you guys. So, all right. See you guys next week.
Catch you later.
Thanks for listening to Note to File. We're committed to continuing to bring you independent and unfiltered coverage of the clinical trial industry.
We want to talk about what you want to hear. So if you have something on your mind, hit us up at notetofilepodcast.com.